identify the problems, all right? But it also supplies solutions. And some of the solutions are not real difficult or real expensive. Any solution where you change things is going to involve some cost, but it's amazing. You see a lot of this stuff, not only does it identify what's wrong, it tells us how to do things right. And yet, the reaction from most, again, most, not all, but most law enforcement, and when I say law enforcement, I mean both the police and the prosecution offices around the country, the district attorneys and state's attorneys in every county in the country, most of law enforcement does not change or recalibrate or reform their practices. Instead, they keep doing the things the same ways over and over, and they ignore what science could bring them. And the result of this is failed evidence. We get miscarriages of justice, we get wrongful convictions, we get cases going wrong, we have problems because much of law enforcement is unwilling to take up the challenge of change and to move in the directions that science very clearly points. As I said, this is long established work. There's strong consensus around lots and lots and lots of most of it. And you would not get scientists in any of these fields challenging it. But when it comes to the point of, well, folks, the people who do the work in the field, are you going to change the way you do things? It's very difficult to see. So this is what hooked me. Why do we have this resistance to science in law enforcement? Is there something peculiar about law enforcement? What are the sources of this? Because I always think if I can understand something, I got a chance to break through it and change it. All right? So that's the object here for me. If we can understand why the resistance is there, we can break through, we can have better law enforcement. I want to be clear about something too. I'm not looking for a world of perfection in law enforcement, in police work, in prosecution work. If you look for perfection and perfect justice in our court system, in our police work, you're going to be disappointed. The justice system is a system made up of people applying laws created by people. So I'm not a perfectionist. I'm not naive about this. But I'm sure we can do better. The tools are there, the information is there, and shame on us if we don't take it up. All right, so to begin with, let's go back to about 1989 when we get the first cases using DNA identification. It's not a mistake to call this a real revolution. DNA upends many settled convictions that were already people on death row, people in prison. It upends these things in a way that nothing else has ever done. To this point, to this date, there are 311 documented post-conviction DNA exonerations since 1989. Now, I've underlined 11 there because when I started talking about the book, when it came out September 2012, that number was 300. Right? So you get a sense, even now, in 1 year, we have 11 more. Right? I've had to update this a bunch of times. Now, where do the errors come from that DNA has revealed? Almost 3/4 of all these wrongful conviction cases feature a faulty eyewitness identification. Almost 3/4 of them. That is clearly the largest category of mistakes. Half of them feature some kind of faulty forensic testing, sometimes outright fraud, sometimes a technique, a forensic method that simply doesn't work as advertised. And in about 1/4 of all cases, we have false confessions or false statements of guilt. Now, obviously, these add up to more than 100% there, right? Why? Because some cases feature more than one of these. But this is the world of wrongful convictions. These are the things that go wrong most often. There are other things too. Snitch testimonies, you know how snitch testimony notoriously unreliable. Prosecutorial misconduct sometimes happens. There's all kinds of things that go wrong, but this is the lion's share. And these are the things that science can affect. That's why I zeroed in on these. So let's ask ourselves, what does the science say? And I think you'll see what I mean when I say problems and solutions. Let's start with eyewitness identification. Right? This is the one place in this constellation of problems where the research goes back the longest. And I know that Professor Berkowitz, your mentor is Elizabeth Loftus. She was, as far as I'm concerned, she's the founder of this field. Here's something that we have learned from lots and lots of the experimental psychology work in this field. There's a difference between simultaneous and sequential lineups. Simultaneous and sequential lineups. Simultaneous lineups is exactly what you think of when you see in your mind a lineup from a cop show or from a movie. It looks like this. Right? That's a simultaneous lineup right there. Usually with more people, there are only 5 here, they could be 6, it could be 8, but this is the idea. All these people seen simultaneously by the witness, and the witness is then asked if the witness can identify anyone. All right? They're all seen at once. A sequential lineup would show people to the witness one at a time. It turns out that simultaneous lineups introduce a level of error into the identification process. They do. We measured it, it's there. How does this happen? Well, a lot of it is from what's called the relative judgment problem. Okay? Look at these 5 guys. The witness is shown the 5 guys and asked, do you recognize anyone? And the question in the witness's mind is, who looks the most like that guy who mugged me? Now, if the guy who mugged the witness is in that lineup, well, that's going to be who looks like him. If the witness's memory is good, if you have a good look at him, that's who will pick. But if the person who mugged him is not there, somebody looks the most like him. One of those guys, right? And they generally pick people for the lineups based on how much they resemble the description that the witness gives. So somebody looks like him, and sometimes, well, relatively speaking, that guy looks the most like him, and we're off to the races. If we change the procedure and move to sequential lineups, most of this error disappears. All right, and here's a contrast, right? This uses photos. Sometimes lineups are live people, sometimes they're photos. Here is a simultaneous photo lineup. Here on the left, the witness sees all 6 of the pictures at once and makes that comparison. On the right, we have a police officer showing the witness one photograph at a time. And the relative judgment process doesn't contaminate things, and most of the error just goes away. And now you don't have to have a police officer handle the photographs. You can do this with software. You just load those, put those pictures in, and the witness doesn't have contact with anybody else, just sees the images and can make his or her choice. Right? So this takes care of a lot of error. Here's another thing that gets into eyewitness identification: whether or not a lineup is conducted in a blind fashion. Okay? It is very common, it has always been the practice in American police departments, that if you have a lineup, it is shown to the witness almost always by the detectives or police officers involved in the case. Right? So if there is a lineup, those people showing the lineup to the witnesses know what the correct answer is, if you will. They know who the suspect is in that lineup that they put in there with filler people. Right? Experimental work has documented over and over and over that when that is the case, when the person showing the lineup knows the correct answer, that answer is telegraphed to the witness. Not consciously, not purposely, not because the police officer lacks integrity. It's nothing like that. The police officer is not even aware of the process. But it operates. It works. It's happening even without anybody knowing it or wanting it to happen. And that introduces a level of error into the process. People with that situation, a non-blind lineup, pick the correct answer more often than when lineups are not blind. So the solution is you go to blind lineups. Here's a photograph that kind of captures this. Here you've got a witness. She's looking through the two-way mirror, whatever you want to call that, at the lineup. If these two gentlemen are police officers, she is more likely to pick the person that they have in mind than if they're not. So how do you do this? How do you put it into practice? You simply get another police officer in there who's not part of the case, who doesn't know the correct answer. It doesn't even have to be a police officer. It could be a civilian. Anybody who's trained at showing lineups to witnesses. All right? Again, problem, way to fix it. Let's talk about interrogations. All right? If you had asked a room full of people 30 years ago, when I graduated law school, would anybody ever confess to a serious crime they did not do? I think the answer would be overwhelming. Of course not. I would never do that. Would you? Of course not. You would say, no, I didn't do it, if you were confronted with that. Well, it turns out, without any doubt, people sometimes confess to crimes they did not do, even without any kind of